The meeting hall of the Galactic Council stretched high into the violet sky of Varith Prime. 47 species gathered in the ancient chamber, their representatives sitting in curved rows that spiraled upward like a great shell. The air hummed with translation fields as voices from 1,000 worlds mixed together. At the center podium stood Velmoth, the Crethaxian elder. Their crystalline body caught the light from 3 suns, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Velmoth had lived for 10,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched stars die. And now they had come to warn the Council about something far more dangerous than any supernova. Honored members, Velmoth's voice resonated through the chamber, translated instantly into every language. I stand before you today to discuss the application of the species called humans for Council membership. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled delegates. The Zafrani ambassador, a towering being of blue scales and golden eyes, let out a deep laugh that echoed off the walls. The humans? Ambassador Krathazon's voice dripped with mockery. Those weak little creatures who only crawled into space 200 years ago? Elder Velmoth, surely you jest. They are barely out of their cradle world. More laughter joined his. The Velkari representative clicked their mandibles in what their species considered humor. The Quinn delegation, floating in their environmental bubbles, pulsed with colors that meant the same thing in their language. Velmoth waited for the noise to die down. Their ancient eyes, older than most civilizations in the room, showed no anger. Only sadness. I do not jest, Velmoth said quietly. I have seen this before. Long before any of your species reached the stars. Long before this council even existed. The laughter stopped. Something in Velmoth's tone made even the most arrogant delegates pay attention. What do you mean, Elder? Asked the Tyrillian High Magistrate, their flower-like head tilting with curiosity. Velmoth raised one crystalline appendage. A holographic display materialized in the air above the podium. It showed ancient footage, corrupted and fragmented, of another species. They looked different from humans, but something about them felt eerily similar. 50,000 years ago, there was another species. We called them the precursors. They were young like humans. They were physically weak like humans. They had short lifespans of barely a century like humans. Velmoth paused, and they were unstoppable. The chamber fell silent. The corrupted footage showed cities burning, fleets moving through space in formations that made no tactical sense, and yet somehow won every battle. It showed a species that should have been easy to defeat, conquering half the known galaxy in less than a generation. The precursors were eliminated, whispered the Quinn representative, their colors shifting to dark purple. Fear. The ancient powers combined their forces and destroyed them completely. This is forbidden history. Yes, Velmoth agreed, because they were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And now I see the same traits in humans, the same relentless drive, the same refusal to accept defeat, the same ability to adapt and learn at speeds that should be impossible. Ambassador Krathazon stood up, his massive frame blocking the light. Elder Velmoth, with all respect to your age, you speak nonsense. These humans are nothing like the precursors. Look at them. They use primitive fusion drives. Their weapons are crude. They have no psionic abilities, no bioengineering, no dimensional technology. They have something worse, Velmoth replied. They have desperation. They know their lives are short, so they refuse to waste time. They know they are weak, so they build machines to make them strong. They know they are alone in a hostile galaxy, so they stick together like no other species I have ever seen. The Velkari representative chittered. Then we should reject their application. Keep them contained in their small corner of space. That would be worse, Velmoth said. Rejected, they will see us as a threat. They will prepare. They will innovate. And one day they will come for us and we will not be ready. So what do you propose? The High Magistrate asked. Velmoth's light dimmed. I propose we accept them. Give them the lowest tier of membership. Minimal territory rights. Watch them closely. And above all, treat them with respect. Never give them a reason to unite against us. Ambassador Krathazon laughed again. Respect? For beings who live barely a century, what can such short-lived creatures possibly accomplish that we, who live for thousands of years, cannot do better? Velmoth looked at the Zafrani ambassador for a long moment. That is exactly what the ancient powers said about the precursors. Right before the precursors nearly destroyed them all. But the warning fell on deaf ears. The council voted, and as expected, humanity was granted the lowest tier of membership. They were given minimal territory rights, restricted access to trade routes, and no voice in council decisions. The assembled delegates saw it as generous, a gift to the primitive newcomers. As the meeting ended and the delegates filed out, Velmoth remained at the podium, watching the corrupted footage loop over and over. Their assistant, a young Crethaxian barely 300 years old, approached. "Elder, do you truly believe humans are like the precursors?" Velmoth did not answer immediately. They simply stared at the hologram, at the burning cities and the impossible victories. "I believe," Velmoth said finally, "that we have made a terrible mistake today. The precursors were eliminated because the ancient powers feared them, but some escaped. The records are incomplete, but there are hints, references to a distant world where survivors might have fled, a world with the right conditions for their kind. What are you saying, Elder?" Velmoth turned off the hologram. The ancient footage disappeared, but the implications remained.
"I am saying that perhaps the precursors were never truly eliminated."
Perhaps they simply went into hiding. Perhaps they waited, adapted, evolved. Perhaps they called themselves something new. The assistant's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "You mean humans might be descended from the precursors?" "I mean," Velmoth said quietly, "that we should all hope I am wrong. Because if I am right, then we have just invited our own doom into the council chambers. And worst of all, we have insulted them by giving them the lowest tier." They walked toward the exit together. Behind them, the empty chamber seemed to echo with phantom laughter. The laughter of 47 species who thought they knew better. The laughter of beings who had never faced an enemy that refused to stay defeated. Velmoth whispered to their assistant, so quietly that even the translation fields barely caught it. "They never listen. They never do." Far across the galaxy, on a blue world orbiting a yellow star, the human delegation received the news of their acceptance into the Galactic Council. They celebrated. They were finally part of the greater galactic community. They were finally recognized. They did not yet know that recognition would come with humiliation. They did not yet know that their new galactic neighbors viewed them as primitives, as lesser beings, as creatures barely worth noticing. They would learn soon enough, and when they did, the galaxy would remember why the elders had warned them, but by then it would be far too late. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. 6 months of learning exactly what their new membership meant. 6 months of insults, dismissals, and casual cruelty disguised as galactic politics. On the mining colony of Kepler 442b, 3,000 human colonists worked to extract rare minerals from the rocky surface. The colony sat on the edge of what the Galactic Council called disputed space, what humanity called their rightful territory, what the Zephrani Empire called an insult to their ancient claims. Sarah Chen watched the sunrise from the observation deck of the main habitat. 2 suns painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her daughter Emma, only 7 years old, pressed her face against the transparent aluminum window. "Mommy, will we see the supply ship today?" Emma asked. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetie." Sarah smiled, running her hand through Emma's hair. "They said it might be delayed because of..." The alarms cut through the morning quiet like a knife. Red lights flooded the observation deck. Sarah grabbed Emma and ran for the shelters, but she already knew they would not make it in time. The Zephrani raiding fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the colony. 12 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons were not designed for precision. They were designed to make statements. The first plasma lance struck the main habitat. Sarah Chen and her daughter Emma never felt anything. They were vaporized instantly along with 200 others. The second strike hit the processing facility. The third destroyed the emergency shelters. The fourth, fifth, and sixth strikes were simply for sport. When the Zephrani fleet finally left, 3,000 colonists were dead. Not a single building remained standing. The message beacon they left behind was short and simple. This world belongs to the Zephrani Empire. All human presence in disputed space is hereby terminated. Further violations will result in similar consequences. The news reached Earth 3 days later. The response from humanity was immediate. They demanded justice. They demanded council intervention. They demanded that the Zephrani Empire be held accountable for what any reasonable being would call genocide. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Ambassador Krath Zahn of the Zephrani Empire stood before them, his scaled face showing no remorse. The space in question is clearly marked as disputed territory in the ancient charts, he said calmly. The humans chose to settle there despite warnings. The responsibility for this tragedy lies with their own stubbornness. The human ambassador Marcus Webb stood with shaking hands. He had known Sarah Chen. She had been his friend. Emma had played with his own children. 3,000 people, his voice cracked. 3,000 civilians, including children. And you call it a tragedy? You murdered them in cold blood. Ambassador Krathzone turned to face him. I call it enforcement of legitimate territorial claims. Perhaps if your species had longer lifespans, you would understand the importance of respecting ancient boundaries. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber, not from all species, but from enough. The Velkari clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Quinn pulsed with colors that meant the same thing. Honored Council, Marcus tried again. We request immediate sanctions against the Zephrani Empire. We request reparations for the families of those killed. We request denied, the High Magistrate said simply. The Council finds that both parties share responsibility for this incident. Humans should not have settled in disputed space. The Zephrani response, while excessive, was within their rights under the Treaty of Ancient Claims. Marcus stared in disbelief. Within their rights? They murdered 3,000 people. They defended their territorial claims, another delegate said. Perhaps humanity should learn the rules of galactic civilization before demanding justice. More laughter. Humans were young. Humans were weak. Humans had no real power in the Council. Why should their complaints matter more than those of any other minor species? Marcus Webb looked around the chamber. He saw the amusement. He saw the contempt. He saw species that had lived for thousands of years looking at him like he was a child throwing a tantrum. He nodded slowly. Then he gathered his documents and walked out of the chamber. Every human diplomat followed him. They said nothing. They filed out in silence. The Council barely noticed. What could humans do? Complain? Protest? They had no military might. They had no powerful allies. They were insignificant. In the back of the chamber, Velmoth watched the humans leave. Their ancient crystalline form flickered with colors that meant dread. What have we done? Velmoth whispered. On Earth, the unified government held an emergency session. Every nation attended. Every leader spoke. For the first time in human history, there was no disagreement. No debate, no political maneuvering. They had asked for justice. The galaxy had laughed at them. They had begged for protection. The galaxy had dismissed them. They had pleaded for mercy. The galaxy had shown them contempt. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would withdraw all ambassadors from the Galactic Council. Humanity would close all diplomatic channels. Humanity would go silent, but silence did not mean inaction. For 3 months, humanity disappeared from galactic affairs. Their ships stopped using the common trade routes. Their communications went dark. Their colonies pulled in defensive perimeters. The other species barely noticed. Some made jokes. The humans are sulking, they said. They will come crawling back soon. They need us more than we need them. Betting pools formed on how long it would take before humanity begged for readmission to the Council. The Zephrani offered odds of 3 months. The Velkari said 6. Most thought it would be less than a year. They did not know what was happening in human space. They did not see the factories being converted from civilian to military production. They did not see every shipyard and every human system working around the clock. They did not see the recruitment drives or the training programs or the weapons development. They did not see Project Achilles. In the Sol system, Admiral Chen stood before the assembled fleet commanders. She was Sarah Chen's sister. Emma had been her niece. She had held that little girl when she was born. She had taught her to ride a bicycle. She had promised to take her to see Earth one day. Now she would never get that chance. Admiral Chen looked at the holographic display showing the new fleet. Thousands of ships, small, fast, cheap to produce, not designed to match the enemy ship for ship, designed to overwhelm them through sheer numbers and coordination. They asked us what short-lived creatures could accomplish, Admiral Chen said, her voice cold as the void between stars. They wanted to know what beings who live barely a century can do that they cannot. She looked at each commander in turn. We are going to show them. We are going to show them what happens when you take everything from people who have nothing left to lose. We are going to show them what desperation looks like, what fury looks like, what humans look like when you murder their children. The commanders stood silent, waiting. Project Achilles is active. Admiral Chen continued. We have mobilized every resource, every factory, every scientist, every engineer. The entire human species is now on a war footing, not because we want war, but because they have shown us that peace is not an option. She pulled up another display. It showed 47 Zafrani military installations across 12 light years. In 72 hours, we strike all of them simultaneously. We show them what coordination means. We show them what happens when a species that lives fast, thinks fast, and adapts fast decides you are the enemy. Admiral Chen's eyes were dry. She had no tears left. They wanted to see what we could accomplish in our limited time. Let's show them exactly what we do with every single second we have. The commanders saluted. Within hours, the orders went out. The fleets began to move. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Zafrani military command did not see the attack coming. Nobody did. Across 12 light-years of space in 47 different star systems, human fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly the same moment. The coordination alone should have been impossible for such a young species. They did not have quantum communication networks. They did not have psionic links. They should not have been able to time their attacks with such precision, but they did. At the Zafrani military station orbiting Kresh Prime, Fleet Commander Zothrak was reviewing supply reports when the alarms began screaming. His first thought was that it was a drill. His second thought, when he saw the sensor readings, was that the sensors must be broken. How many ships? He demanded. 400, Commander, his sensor officer replied, his voice shaking. No, wait. 600, 700. Commander, they just keep coming. Zothrak watched in horror as the human fleet materialized. They were small ships, each one barely larger than a Zafrani fighter. But there were so many of them. They moved in perfect formation like a school of fish or a swarm of insects. Launch all fighters, he ordered. Prepare main weapons. Show these primitives what real military power looks like. The Zafrani battlecruiser was a work of art. It had been built over 50 years by master craftsmen. Its shields could withstand anything. Its weapons could destroy planets. It was commanded by officers with centuries of experience. It lasted less than 3 minutes. The human ships did not fight like any enemy Zothrak had ever faced. They did not form battle lines. They did not engage in honorable single combat. They swarmed, hundreds of ships attacking from every angle at once, coordinating their fire with split-second precision. When the shields finally failed, the human ships did something that made Zothrak understand true terror. 50 of them simply accelerated directly at the battlecruiser. They made no attempt to evade. They just rammed it. Kamikaze attacks, suicide runs, tactics that no civilized species would ever consider because life was precious and ships took time to build. But humans built fast. And humans, it seemed, did not care about acceptable losses. The same scene played out across all 47 installations. The Zafrani Empire had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to wars that lasted decades, where each ship was precious, where casualties were mourned and studied. They faced an enemy that seemed willing to throw away 10 ships to destroy one of theirs and still come out ahead. The reports flooded into the Galactic Council within hours. The emergency session was called immediately. Delegates arrived in shock. Ambassador Krathzon stood before them, his scales pale, his usual arrogance gone. They attacked without warning, he said, without declaration of war, without any attempt at negotiation. They just struck. The Velkari representative chittered nervously. How many installations did they hit? All of them, Krathzon said. Every major military base in our outer territories. 47 installations. All struck at the same time. Across 12 light years, silence fell over the chamber. The same thought went through every mind present. How? How had a species barely 200 years into space managed such coordination? What about casualties? The High Magistrate asked. Krathzon's voice dropped to a whisper. 30,000 dead. Maybe more. The reports are still coming in. Velmoth stood slowly. The ancient Krathaxian moved to the center of the chamber. Every eye turned to them. You killed 3,000 of them, Velmoth said quietly. They killed 30,000 of you. 10 for 1. This is how humans fight. This is what I tried to warn you about. We must stop them, another delegate shouted. We must mobilize the combined council forces. And do what? Velmoth asked. Where are they? Did any of your installations capture images of human command ships? Did anyone identify their fleet bases? Did anyone even see where they came from? More silence. The human attack had been like a ghost. Strike and disappear. No warnings. No declarations. No honor. This is just the beginning, Velmoth continued. Humans do not fight to send messages. They do not fight for honor. They fight to win. And they have barely started. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Zephrani Empire mobilized its full military might. They called in fleets from across their territory. They activated reserves. They prepared for total war. 3 weeks later, the Battle of Zephyros IV showed them that preparation meant nothing. The Zephrani fleet was magnificent. 200 capital ships supported by 5,000 fighters. They were ready. They were confident. They had chosen the battlefield, set up defensive positions, prepared ambushes. The human fleet arrived and did not care about any of it. They dropped nuclear mines in the approach vectors. They launched relativistic kinetic weapons from beyond sensor range. They sent in waves of AI-controlled drones that did not care about dying because they were not alive in the first place. What shocked the Zephrani most was how fast humans learned. Every tactic that worked was immediately copied across the entire fleet. Every weakness they found was exploited within minutes. It was as if the human ships were all connected, all learning, all adapting as one. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Zephrani lost 140 ships. The humans lost over 3,000. The humans called it a victory because it was. They had lost more ships, but they could replace them in weeks. The Zephrani ships took years to build. Do that math enough times, and there was only one possible ending. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity waged war like they approached every other problem. Like engineering. Like mathematics. Like a puzzle to be solved. They tested tactics. They gathered data. They iterated. They improved. While other species took decades to adjust their military doctrine, humans did it in weeks. Sometimes days. The Zephrani Empire's logistics were legendary. They had supply lines that had operated flawlessly for thousands of years. Humans destroyed them in a month. Not through better logistics, through sheer speed. Human supply ships moved faster, carried more, and arrived where they were needed before the Zephrani even knew they were needed. It was not that humans were better at war. It was that they approached war differently. Every species in the galaxy saw war as an unfortunate necessity, something to be conducted with honor and restraint. Humans saw war as a problem, and humans were very, very good at solving problems. The council convened again, this time in panic. Species that had mocked humanity 6 months ago now spoke in hushed, frightened tones. "We must offer mediation," one delegate suggested. "We tried," the High Magistrate said. "The humans ignore all communications. They simply fight," Velmoth spoke again. "They are not ignoring you. They heard you the first time when you laughed at their grief. When you dismissed their dead, they learned what your mediation is worth. Now they handle it themselves." "But the casualties," someone protested. "The destruction." "Yes," Velmoth agreed. "The humans are suffering terrible losses. Tens of thousands dead. Hundreds of ships destroyed. Do you know what they call it?" "Acceptable." The word sent a chill through the chamber. A species that considered such losses acceptable was not a species that could be reasoned with. It was a species that had decided the cost of victory was worth paying. 4 months after the first strike, the human fleet arrived at the Zephrani homeworld. They had fought their way through 60 light-years of space. They had destroyed or captured every military asset in their path. And now they were here. The orbital defenses were the most powerful in the Zephrani Empire. They had been built over centuries. They could withstand any assault. The humans did not assault them. They simply surrounded the planet and waited. Then they broadcast a message. It was short. It was simple. It was in every language spoken in the Zephrani Empire. "Surrender or your world burns. You have 24 hours. The Zephrani leadership called an emergency meeting. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to call the human bluff. Some argued that no species would actually destroy an entire world. Ambassador Krathzon, who had been on the homeworld when the siege began, looked at the sensor readings showing the human fleet. Thousands of ships, all of them pointing weapons at his world. "They killed 3,000 humans," he said quietly. "The humans killed 30,000 of us in response." Tento 1. "What do you think they will do if we make them attack our homeworld where billions live?" The math was simple, terrible, undeniable. 23 hours and 57 minutes after the human ultimatum, the Zafrani Empire surrendered unconditionally. The war had lasted 6 months. The galaxy had expected it to last decades. The terms of surrender were read before the Galactic Council. Every species in the chamber listened in stunned silence as the human demands were laid out. The Zafrani Empire would be reduced from 47 systems to 3. Their military would be completely dismantled. Their warships would be scrapped or handed over to human forces. They would pay reparations for the next century, 10 billion credits per year, every year. For the families of those killed on Kepler 442b, Ambassador Krathzon stood before the council, his proud scales now dull, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He signed the documents without speaking. What could he say? His empire had been shattered in 6 months by a species they had called primitive, but the terms themselves were not what shocked the galaxy. It was what the humans had chosen not to do. They had not destroyed the Zafrani homeworld. They could have. They had the weapons. They had the fleet. They had the rage. But they had given a choice. Surrender or burn. The Zafrani had surrendered. The humans had kept their word. Velmoth studied the surrender documents. They had been expecting something far worse. Occupation, enslavement, genocide. The humans had every justification. 3,000 civilians murdered, children killed, and the humans had simply demanded justice. Fair justice. Harsh, yes, but not cruel. They showed restraint, the High Magistrate said, sounding almost confused. After everything the Zafrani did, the humans showed mercy. Not mercy, Velmoth corrected. Calculation. The humans are proving a point. They could have destroyed the Zafrani completely. Everyone knows it. But they stopped. They showed that their fury has limits, that they can be reasonable, that they prefer justice over vengeance. Then why do you look so concerned, Elder? Velmoth's crystalline form flickered. Because now the galaxy knows 2 things about humans. First, that they can wage war with terrifying efficiency. Second, that they choose not to use their full power. Do you understand what that combination means? The High Magistrate said nothing. They were beginning to understand. Within weeks, 5 species that had laughed at humanity during that first council meeting sent formal apologies. Not because they were forced to, because they were terrified. They had seen what happened to the Zafrani. They wanted humanity to know they meant no offense. They wanted to be friends. 12 more species opened full trade negotiations. They offered favorable terms. They offered technology exchanges. They offered anything that might keep humanity happy. The humans accepted the apologies. They accepted the trade deals. They were polite, professional, but they did not forget. Everyone could see it in their eyes. They would never forget. 3 months after the Zafrani surrender, the Velkari hegemony made a move. They were the second most powerful empire in the council. They had watched the humans defeat the Zafrani, but they were not impressed. The Zafrani, they reasoned, had grown soft. The Velkari would show these upstart humans what real military might look like. They moved 3 battle fleets into human space. Not attacking, just positioning, making a statement, testing the waters. The human response was swift and public. They released their complete military inventory to every species in the galaxy, every ship, every weapon, every capability, nothing hidden. The numbers made the galaxy go silent. 50,000 warships, operational, right now, with another 100,000 in various stages of construction. Production capacity that could build 1,000 ships per month. Weapon systems ranging from conventional to things that made veteran admirals wake up sweating. The message that accompanied the data dump was simple. We fought the Zafrani War with 30,000 ships. We could have used more. We chose not to. This is our current fleet strength. In 2 years, we will have 200,000 warships. We can outbuild any species in the galaxy. We can outfight anyone who challenges us. We can outlast any conflict. And then the final line, the one that would be quoted in history texts for millennia. We prefer peace. We will enforce it if necessary. The Velkari hegemony withdrew their fleets within 24 hours. No explanation given. No excuses made. They simply left and hoped humanity would not remember the insult. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. This one was different from all the others. This time they were not responding to a crisis. They were making an offer. The High Magistrate stood before the empty human seats. The human delegation had not attended a council session since they walked out 8 months ago. We wish to extend an invitation to humanity, the High Magistrate said to the recording devices that would carry this message to Earth. Not as the lowest tier members you once were, but as equals. We offer you a full council seat. We offer you voting rights. We offer you the respect you have earned. The delegates waited for 3 days. On Earth, the unified government debated. Some wanted to reject the offer out of pride. Some wanted to accept and move forward. Some wanted to make demands. In the end, Admiral Chen made the decision. She had led the war. She had lost her sister and niece. She had seen thousands of young men and women die under her command. If anyone had the right to speak for humanity, it was her. She arrived at the council chambers not in a military uniform, but in a simple black suit. She walked to the podium where Velmoth had warned them all those months ago. She looked at the assembled delegates, these representatives of species who had laughed at human grief. Humanity accepts your offer, she said. But we have conditions. The chamber held its breath. First, the council will establish clear protections for all species under council law. No more disputed territories. No more ambiguous claims. If someone settles a world, it is theirs. Period. Some delegates nodded. That was reasonable. Second, the council will establish a joint defense force. Multiple species working together. Not to conquer, but to protect. Any attack on one member is an attack on all. More nods. That was actually a good idea. Third, the council will prioritize technology sharing with less advanced species. Not as charity, as investment. Lifting everyone up benefits everyone. Now the delegates were looking at each other. These were not demands for power. These were demands for fairness. Admiral Chen paused. And finally, humanity demands that every species here remember what happened to Kepler 442b. Remember that 3,000 people died because they were deemed insignificant. Remember that we were laughed at when we begged for justice. Her voice hardened. We are not asking you to fear us. We are asking you to respect all species, no matter how young or weak they seem. Because if you do not, we will remember, and we will respond. She looked directly at the spot where Ambassador Krathzone used to sit. The Zafrani seat was empty now. They had lost the right to sit on the council. We showed restraint with the Zafrani. We gave them a choice. We let them surrender. But make no mistake, honored delegates, that restraint was a choice, not a weakness. We possess weapons we never used, tactics we never deployed, capabilities we never revealed. Admiral Chen pulled up a holographic display. It showed a moon orbiting a gas giant. Nothing special about it. This is the uninhabited moon of Theta Carinae II. It is 3 astronomical units from here. Watch. A beam of energy, invisible to the naked eye, reached across space. The moon did not explode. It did not vaporize. It simply split in half, cleanly, as if cut by a knife. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. 3 astronomical units. That was impossible. No weapon had that range. No weapon had that precision. We call it a Kasaba howitzer, Admiral Chen said calmly. We have 237 of them in orbit around human worlds. We never used them in the war. We preferred close combat, personal. She let that sink in. Then she smiled. It was not a cruel smile. Just tired. We prefer peace. But we will enforce it if necessary. Do we have an agreement? The vote was unanimous. After the session, Velmoth approached Admiral Chen. The ancient Krathaxian had watched everything from their seat in the back. I tried to warn them, Velmoth said. I know. Admiral Chen replied. I watched the recordings. You knew what we were, what we could become. I knew what the precursors were, Velmoth corrected. I suspected what you might be. Now I am certain. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The Krathaxian archives. You have the complete records, do you not? The real story of the precursors? I do, Velmoth said. Would you like to see them? I think it is time humanity learned where we really came from. Velmoth gestured for her to follow. As they walked through the ancient corridors of the council building, the elder spoke. The precursors were not destroyed, Admiral. That is what the official histories say, but it is not the truth. They were driven out, forced to flee. The combined might of 12 ancient empires hunted them across the galaxy. Why? Admiral Chen asked. Because they were too dangerous, too adaptable, too stubborn to stay defeated. The ancient powers feared that one day the precursors would surpass them. So they tried to eliminate the threat. They reached a sealed door. Velmuth placed their crystalline appendage on the lock. Ancient technology, older than most stars, recognized them and opened. Inside was a vault. And in that vault were records that would change everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. They did not eliminate the precursors, Velmuth said. Some escaped. They found a distant world. A safe world. A world with the right atmosphere, the right gravity, the right conditions. 1 year after the war ended, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. Where the Zafrani seat had once been, a memorial now stood, not celebrating their defeat but honoring the lessons learned. A reminder to never underestimate another species again. Admiral Chen sat in the human seat now. A full council member, equal to all others. Her uniform bore the insignia of the new position, but she wore the same tired expression she had carried since Kepler 442b. Some weights never fully lifted. Today's agenda was significant. The Council would vote on humanity's proposal for the Joint Defense Initiative. 18 species had already signed on. 20 more were considering it, and a few were actively resisting. The Corvallian ambassador stood to voice concerns. Their species had spent millennia building their military independence. They did not like the idea of sharing command with others. With respect, Ambassador Chen, this joint defense initiative undermines the sovereignty of individual species. Each empire has the right to defend itself as it sees fit. Admiral Chen nodded patiently. I understand your concern, Ambassador, and you are correct. Each species has the right to defend itself. This initiative does not take that away. It simply offers an alternative, strength through cooperation. But what if we disagree on how to respond to a threat? Then we discuss it. We debate, we vote, like civilized beings should. Admiral Chen leaned forward. The galaxy has spent too long with every species standing alone. The strong prey on the weak. The old dismiss the young. We have a chance to change that pattern, to build something better. The Tyrillian High Magistrate, who had seen how quickly humanity had adapted to galactic politics, spoke up. The humans have proven they do not need our help to defend themselves. Yet they offer to share their military strength with species that once mocked them. Why? Admiral Chen smiled sadly. Because we learned a terrible truth during the war. We are very good at destruction, too good. It would be easy for humanity to become exactly what the ancient powers feared about the precursors. Conquerors, tyrants, unstoppable and uncaring. She paused. We do not want to be that. We would rather be part of something larger, something that makes everyone safer, something worth protecting. Velmuth, who now advised the Council openly, spoke for the first time that session. The Admiral speaks truth. I have lived 10,000 years. I have seen countless empires rise and fall. They all made the same mistake. They believed power meant isolation. That strength came from standing alone. The ancient Crethaxian's voice carried through the chamber with the weight of millennia. Humanity has shown us a different path. They are unstoppable, yes, but they choose to use that strength to build rather than destroy, to protect rather than conquer. That is true power. The vote passed. 41 species in favor. 3 opposed. 3 abstaining. The Joint Defense Initiative would move forward. After the session, several younger species approached Admiral Chen, the Farathi, who had only achieved spaceflight 30 years ago. The Zellians, who had been ignored by the Council for decades. The Morth, who everyone considered primitive because they still used biological ships. Ambassador Chen, the Farathi representative, said nervously, we were hoping humanity might consider a mentorship program. We have much to learn about navigating galactic politics, about defending ourselves, about being taken seriously. Admiral Chen remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, to be laughed at, to be called primitive by species that had forgotten they were once young too. Of course, she said, we would be honored to work with you, all of you, because we remember what it is like to be where you are now, and we promise you this, nobody will ever laugh at you again, not while humanity stands beside you. The relief on their faces was visible. They had found allies, protectors, friends. 3 months later, the Crethaxian archives were officially opened to humanity. The full records, the complete history, everything about the precursors. The news spread quickly across Earth and all human colonies. There was shock. There was debate. Some people refused to believe it. Some embraced it immediately. Some needed time to process that humanity was not native to Earth at all. but refugees who had fled across the galaxy 50,000 years ago. But one fact became clear to everyone. The traits that made humanity unique, the stubbornness, the adaptability, the refusal to accept defeat, were not random. They were survival mechanisms, genetic memories from ancestors who had faced extinction and refused to die. In a speech to the unified government, Admiral Chen addressed the revelation. "We are the children of survivors," she said, "of beings who were hunted across the stars and refused to give up. They made it to Earth, they adapted, they evolved. They forgot their past, but they never forgot how to fight, how to persist, how to be unstoppable." She looked at the camera, knowing her words would be broadcast to every human world. The precursors were feared because they were dangerous. We have inherited that danger, but we also inherited something else. The memory of being hunted, of being driven from our homes, of losing everything. We will never let that happen again. Not to us, not to anyone. The elders warned the galaxy that humans are unstoppable. They were right. But what the galaxy is learning now is that we do not have to be enemies. We can be allies. We can be friends. We can be the protectors that the galaxy needs, not the conquerors it fears. The speech was heard across the galaxy. Reactions varied. Some species were comforted. Some were still afraid. But none of them would ever dismiss humanity again. 5 years after the war, something remarkable happened. A small colony of Zafrani refugees displaced by the conflict found themselves under attack by pirates. They sent out a distress call, not knowing if anyone would answer, not knowing if humanity would care about helping the species that had murdered their people. The human response fleet arrived within 3 hours. They drove off the pirates. They provided medical aid. They helped repair damaged habitats. And when the Zafrani colonists tried to thank them, tried to apologize for what their empire had done, the human commander simply said, "You are not your government. You are not responsible for what they did. You are people who needed help. That is all that matters." That story spread throughout the galaxy faster than any battle report. Humanity had shown mercy to their former enemies, not because they forgot, but because they chose forgiveness over revenge. On Varith Prime, in the same council chambers where this had all begun, Velmoth and Admiral Chen stood looking at a new installation. A garden. Beautiful plants from 47 different worlds all growing together in harmony. "It is called the Garden of Understanding," Velmoth explained. Each species contributed a plant native to their homeworld, a symbol of cooperation, of unity and diversity. Admiral Chen looked at the earth plants in the center. Roses, oak trees, bamboo, simple things but beautiful in their way. "Do you regret it?" Velmoth asked. "The war? The deaths? Everything you had to do?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long time. She thought of Sarah, of little Emma, of all the faces she would never see again. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "I regret every life lost on both sides. But I do not regret fighting for justice. I do not regret showing the galaxy that humanity cannot be dismissed. And I do not regret what we are building now." She gestured to the garden. "This would not exist if we had not fought. The Joint Defense Initiative would not exist. The protections for younger species would not exist. Sometimes you have to fight not because you want to, but because the world needs to change." Velmoth's crystalline form pulsed with agreement. "You have done what the precursors never could. You have returned to the galaxy not as conquerors but as leaders, not as tyrants but as equals. Perhaps that is what 50,000 years of exile taught your species. Humility. Or perhaps," Admiral Chen said with a slight smile, "it taught us that being unstoppable does not mean you should stop caring. That being able to destroy everything does not mean you should. That true strength is knowing when not to use your power." Nearby, a group of children played in the garden. Human children, Zafrani children, Farathi children, species that had been enemies now raising their young together, learning together, growing together. One of the human children, a girl about Emma's age, ran up to Admiral Chen. "Ambassador, look what we made." She held up a drawing showing different species holding hands around a planet. Admiral Chen knelt down to look at the picture. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed in public. "It is beautiful, sweetheart." "What is it?" "It is the future," the girl said confidently. "Where everyone is friends, where nobody fights, where everyone helps each other, That sounds like a good future, Admiral Chen said softly. Will you help make it real? Admiral Chen looked at the child, at her innocent hope, at her belief that the future could be better than the past. Yes, she promised. We will all help make it real. The child smiled and ran back to her friends. Back to playing. Back to building a future where the past did not have to repeat. Velmoth watched the children play. The elders were right. Humans are unstoppable. But we were wrong about what that meant. We thought it meant you would destroy everything in your path. We did not understand that you could be unstoppable in kindness, unstoppable in compassion, unstoppable in your refusal to let others suffer what you suffered.